Hi, and welcome to this week's 5 Minute Masterclass. This week I'd like to talk to you about the need to retain information. And in particular, I'm thinking of situations where professionals make notes, they have documents that they may be prepared, and they get put away and they get forgotten about. And in this really short masterclass, I just want to alert you to the fact that particularly in family cases, information that you hold could be asked for long after you have prepared it. In particular, there was a case a couple of years ago that raised the issue of when documents were prepared, how long after the event could they be relied upon, and how important it was for parents or carers to be able to challenge information that local authorities were relying on. So many of you will know that when a local authority comes to look at the evidence it has in respect of a family, when it's looking at carrying out assessments, or perhaps they've tried everything and they're now looking at what evidence they have in terms of issuing care proceedings, they will look at old historical records. Now, if you've got a child who's maybe 5 or 6, the records are unlikely to be hugely substantial. However, if you've got a child who is maybe 11 or 12, then the records could be huge. And there could also be records scattered across the country if the family has moved around a lot. And in this particular case, the parents wanted to challenge information that had been sought. And so the court said, well, of course you can challenge that information, and of course you have the right to say in court whether or not you agree with it, and you have the right as parents, where a local authority is relying on this information, to say that you want to have that person come to court and give evidence, and you have the opportunity to tackle them on some of the issues you don't agree with. And I've had cases in my professional career in my legal career where we've had to look 6 or 7 years back for information, and we've had to get witnesses in from other authorities, from other areas, where the local authority I was working for at the time was saying we want to rely on this information. And we then had to get statements from people in relation to information that came about 8-9 years ago. So the takeaways for this masterclass are really around what you do with the information you have. And a key point is you've got to make sure it's safe. Make sure that you're keeping documents in line with government requirements. For local authorities, they have to keep documents for lots and lots of years. Solicitors tend to keep documents for 6 years after the case, or until a child is 18, and there are different rules for different sectors. But I want you to be aware that even if a child leaves your setting aged 4 or 5, it's possible that information could be asked could be asked for information 7 or 8 years later about a child that left the setting, if disclosures are made, if allegations come to light of issues that would have taken place back when the child was in your setting. So I appreciate that information can be sent on, but any documentation you retain, make sure it's kept safe, because one, it's data protection and you have to comply with that, but 2, it could be required in the future. Make sure that, as with disclosures, any information you have is accurately recorded and it's kept in a place that is suitable for the type of information you're holding. If you make handwritten notes, think about how you're storing them. Are you then typing them up, and is there a database system you can use? Or are they simply handwritten notes that go into a file that then is put into a cupboard and is then left until perhaps the end of term, or longer in some cases, and is then dealt with in one swift movement after so many years? It varies from person to person, it varies from profession to profession. Each area and each organisation will have its own guidelines on it. Make sure you're aware of them. Make sure you're following the guidelines that are appropriate for your profession. And if you're in any doubt about how to deal with documentation that you've got that's in relation to a child, ask your local Safeguarding Children's Board for what their local protocols are. But remember, any documentation you have could be asked for at a much later date. And so you need to be aware that it could be required, and that any documentation kept is kept safely and is done in line with data protection and within your own professional guidelines. So until next week, thank you very much.